Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. In order to be able to go on this path of Sufism, in order to be able to enter into the various realms of understanding the truth, one has to have the capacity to be reflective. One cannot be reactive and enter into this path. In other words, if you take all your direction from your mind, then you are in a constant state of reacting to the stimuli that enters into your being. So as we walk through this world, things occur. As things occur, our mind sees them and understands them to the extent of the capability of the mind, and then reacts to them. The reaction is almost instantaneous. So the mind sees and reacts, sees and reacts, sees and reacts. The person who is capable of introspection and contemplation doesn't react instantaneously. There is a lag between their reaction and the stimulus. In other words, they see things and they consider them and they filter them through wisdom and what is appropriate behavior. Reaction that happens through the mind is not about appropriate behavior. Reaction that happens immediately through the mind is about what the mind considers self-protection. So the mind is connected to the nefs, the lower portion of the self. And the lower portion, the lower tendencies of beings are basically to protect the being. There's no universality to it. There's no oneness to it. There's no unity to it. There is separation and differences. So as long as you enter into situations and the mind sees them and the mind reacts to them and the mind looks to protect itself and what it considers important to itself, you can't transcend into unity. You can't transcend into a universal understanding of existence. You can't become one with all. You're only one with yourself, and everything else is separate from the self. For instance, somebody hits you. The mind reacts, becomes angry, and hits back. That's a mind reaction. The mind sees something that it wants, and somebody else has it. The mind becomes jealous of what somebody else has. If you begin to understand these reactions, you begin to understand the duality within these reactions. You begin to understand the differences that are seen with these reactions. You begin to understand that transcendence can't occur while you are in a reactive state. Transcendence can't occur as long as you respond automatically to what goes on around you, and you respond with a motive that attempts to protect the self. The transcendent nature of existence shows people that they are more than their own self-motive. They are something other than their own mind. They're something more than this body. The reactive experience says, all I am is my body, and I have to protect it. All I am is what I see and what my senses understand, and I have to protect it. And in this protection, you create separation. And the separation is between myself and you. Only when you go beyond the need to protect yourself are you capable of transcending into the realm of God's qualities. God does not need to protect himself. God has no fear. God is beyond what anybody can do to him, because no one can do anything to him. He is beyond all that. Well, as long as you are not beyond that, as long as you are in fear of being hurt, as long as you feel you have to revenge what has been done to you, you can't transcend. And it's a self-limiting situation. People believe that their anger somehow strikes out at someone else. In truth, their anger strikes out at themselves because it limits who they are. They believe revenge strikes out at someone else, but in truth, it strikes out at themselves because it limits who they are capable of being. It limits the expansion of personal consciousness. Personal consciousness becomes limited by the qualities that you have. Now, in the same way that it is limited by the qualities that you have, it can become transcendent by the qualities that you have. It all depends on the qualities. If you look at the satanic qualities and you try to make an analysis of them, you will find that they are almost always qualities that separate you from other people and that somehow try to put yourself in a better position than other people. The things that are forbidden are those kinds of qualities. What's gossip? Gossip is an attempt to put somebody else in a position that is difficult for them. Why? Because you want to elevate yourself and somehow make someone else less important. So you say things about them that make them less important. In that act of trying to build yourself up in this illusory world, you actually denigrate yourself in reality. And you make yourself less in reality. Anger is a situation where you are in a combative mode with somebody else. Why are you in a combative mode with somebody else? Because you feel they are somehow a threat to you, or are making it difficult for you, or you want to make it difficult for them because of some self-motive that you have. This anger, while you may think that it puts you in a better position in this illusory world, in fact degrades you in the world of reality. And choices have to be made by us each individually as to which world are we trying to become centered in. Which world are we trying to make our home? What is it that we're trying to accomplish for ourselves? Are we trying to become important and relevant in this illusory world, or are we trying to create a space for us in Allah's realm? And we have to take on different attitudes for each one of these motives. So the motives for the world, for the illusory world, are entirely different than the motives for Allah's realm, than the motives for God's world. Peace is a motive for God's world. Peace is not always a motive in the illusory world. If you want somebody else's real estate, there's going to be a war, because people don't want to give up their real estate. And that's how countries go to war. One country wants the whatever it is that other country has to offer, their oil, their iron, their elemental wealth, their gold. In order to get that, they're going to have to wrestle it away from them. That's going to lead to conflict. It's going to lead to death. It's going to lead to difficulty. And this may make a victory in the elemental world, but it doesn't make for a victory in the world of Allah's realm. The world of Allah's realm is a realm of peace, and it's a realm beyond the reactionary state of the mind. So if we live our world, if we live our life in our mind, we are constantly going to be in a reactionary state to the things that our mind interacts with. So the mind sees a situation, reacts. The mind enters into a situation, reacts. And it always reacts in the same way. It reacts to protect the self. When the sheikh, the guru, talks about transcending the illusory ocean, they're talking about going through and bypassing the reactionary nature of the mind. In other words, can we go through this world and see what goes on and not become involved? Can we stay on the sideline where Allah's world exists, where the realm of peace and tranquility exists? Now, in religions, they have monasteries where men and women go, and they go to an area that's been secluded and cut off from the rest of the world so that they don't have to live in this reactive world. And the purpose of this seclusion is to pray for the rest of the world, to pray for peace to come that they find within their seclusion. Now, the truth is that often, even within these monasteries, minds take over. And even though they may be what appear to be small, petty things, for these people, they become huge, immense things. Buddha taught to people who had abandoned the world. His teaching was mostly aimed at renunciates, people who had given up the world and had entered into a life of homelessness, where they they were no longer attached to things, or supposedly so. Yet, there would be competition among the monks as to who could get the best food. There would be competition among the monks as to who would be asked to speak to the community. There would be competition amongst the monks about who would get the most respect from the lay community. These things didn't leave them just because they had renounced the world. We don't have to renounce the world. We don't have to go and live homeless in order to renounce these things. But we have to somehow renounce them. We have to be able to live among the world of things, the world of illusion, and not be attached simultaneously to these things. We have to be able to do what we have to do within this illusory world, but not have it affect our inner being, not get angry, not strike out, not cause revenge, not take everything personally. Be able to live here, yet simultaneously live in the realm of God and have God's qualities. If you watched the Sheikh, if you watched the Insan Kamil, the perfected human who became a jnana guru, a teacher of wisdom, you would see his distance from everything around him, yet his total involvement with everything around him. So he could talk to you and listen to your specific problem and give you specific answers from a wisdom point of view as to your specific problem without it affecting him and without him having to strike out or seek the kinds of methods that the world uses in order to resolve its problems. There are a whole other retinue of solutions that are different than the world solutions for the same problems. There are wisdom solutions, and then there are worldly solutions. If someone does something that you consider somehow harms you, the world says, harm them back. In wisdom it says, there is no harm, because you can't be harmed unless you are attached to the world. If you transcend it, then they can't touch you, just like they can't touch Allah. But if you allow yourself to come down to the level that people react to you with, you're going to react to them in the same level. So we have to cross over the mind. We have to cross over the ocean of illusion, which is the mind, and get to the shore, which is the heart, which reacts with God's qualities to what goes on in the world. Can you imagine if the Sheikh did not have patience for his disciples, and when they came to him, he reacted to them with the same qualities that they bring to him? What would happen? All of the disciples would end up being destroyed. All of the disciples would end up being pushed away and thrown away because they had not yet reached the levels that the Sheikh is trying to bring them to. But the Sheikh sees the disciples in their potentiality. He sees what they can become. Now, the Sheikh also says that what it is that you should become is me. The Sheikh says, become like me. But if you take with you the tendencies of the illusory world and the qualities of the illusory world, revenge, shame, hypocrisy, lying, theft, murder, all of these things, you can't become like him. So you can be with him, but you can't become like him. And what's the point of being with him if your purpose isn't to become like him? And if what you want to do is become like him, you have to give up your attachment to the worldly way of doing things. You have to become dead to those things. You have to become dead to anger. You have to become dead to resentment. You have to become dead to gossip. You have to become dead to retribution. You have to become dead to revenge. And if you can't do that, you can't walk in the Sheikh's path. You can't walk in the Sheikh's shoes. You can't walk in the realm of truth, because these things don't belong there. And if they don't belong there, you bring them with you, you don't belong there, and you won't be allowed there. Not because of what anybody else does or what anybody else thinks, but because of what you do and what you think. So we need to somehow cleanse ourselves of reactive behavior and begin to enter into transcendent behavior. Behavior that understands the difficulties of others and why they act in the way they do, and act towards them with generosity and with kindness until they overcome the things that they lack. And the things that they lack are the understanding that they are more than their anger, that they are more than their resentment, that they are more than their shame, that there's something else to them. And if they can't see that, then things will be difficult for them for the rest of their lives. And no matter what you say to them, they can't be altered. And that's what is meant in some of the scriptures that say, no matter what you tell them, they won't be able to see. No matter what you tell them, they won't be able to understand. And why can't they understand? Because they're trapped inside their idea of who they are, and they're trapped in the need to protect themselves. They're like wild animals. And you can't tame an animal that feels it's being attacked. The only way an animal can be tamed is if it feels that it is not in danger. When an animal isn't in danger, then it'll do some of the things that you want it to do. But if it thinks that everything you're doing to it is somehow going to harm it, the animal is constantly going to be striking out and back at you while you're trying to train it. Well, it's like that with people. People who are constantly on the defensive can never be brought into the path. People who are constantly on the defensive will be spending their life defending themselves as opposed to becoming real. And their life will be used up in vengeance and in anger and in gossip and in retribution. Don't let that happen to you. Don't let that be your life. Don't live a life that is in reaction to others. You live your life that is a reaction to God's wondrous mercy and grace. The Quran is constantly speaking of don't give any partner to God. And that means so many things. It means don't hold other things at the same import that you hold God. Don't spend your consciousness on other things as opposed to God. Because while you're doing that, while you're allowing your consciousness to rest with the ideas of the world and the difficulties of the world, your consciousness isn't residing with God. And so you've made gods other than God your God, because that's what your time is being spent with. So as long as you have a reactive life to the world, and that's the extent of your life, you're denying your Lord, because they become the veils that separate you from your Lord. All of your reactions to the world that are done in a negative way are veils that separate you through your Lord, from your Lord. So somehow we have to break through the way the mind acts. And essentially, it comes through not paying attention to the mind and not doing what the mind wants. Schizophrenics are different than normal people because they do everything that the mind says. A schizophrenic will be on a bridge, and your mind will say, jump, and the schizophrenic will jump. The normal person will not jump. But let's take that to a simple thing, where somebody says something nasty to you. The mind says, say something nasty back. The reactive person will say something nasty back. The transcendent person will turn and walk away. Can we turn and walk away from the enticement to react? Can we turn and walk away from the addiction to react? Because as long as we are addicted to reacting to the world, our life is in this world. And we haven't created a life in the realm of the truth. We haven't created a life with God. And our purpose here is to understand how to create a life with God. A life where Allah, God, is the penultimate of our understanding and the penultimate of our existence and the most important thing in our life, to which we give no partner to which we hold nothing in the same status as. But what happens is wealth becomes more important than God. Power becomes more important than God. Reputation becomes more important than God. Pride becomes more important than God. All of these things become more important than God. But nothing is more important than God. And it's only when we leave everything else behind that God becomes the most important thing in our existence. And we have to focus on that. And we have to understand that. So we have to be able to stop living this reactive world and transcend into a contemplative understanding of things and putting things in their appropriate place. As long as we think that the slings and arrows of this world and blocking them is what we're here for, we're going to be involved in constant combat and constant battles. We need to move away from that into a state of tranquility and into a state of peace within our being. And this takes constant work, constant prayer, constant contemplation, and a constant consciousness that stays focused on the supremacy of Allah and how everything else is secondary to that. May it come to pass that we're all able to do this in our lives and we find our true home with our Creator. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.